So, Mathur, should we start now?
Sure, please go ahead. You can start whenever you wish.
Yeah, thank you. So, good evening and warm welcome to all the friends. This is Professor Sanjay Verma from IIM Ahmedabad, and we are together again for one more round of talk. I am very happy to share with you. Today we have Professor Ajeet Narain Mathur, and he's going to speak on the topic Mysteries in Management. As I have already shared a very, very brief profile of Professor Mathur. Professor Mathur is faculty in Strategic and International Business area at IIM Ahmedabad, and he also works in economics area. His interests are at the crossroads of economics, human behavior in groups, law, strategic management of organizational knowing and international business. He has done a lot of multidisciplinary work. He has worked both as advisor to various organizations and expert on institutional design and missing markets with organizations such as ILO, WHO, ADB, and European Commission. He is one of the authors of the International Encyclopedia of Laws. There is a very, very long work profile of Professor Mathur, and I would like to keep it brief because I want to give more time to him to speak on that topic. He has published around 30 books and more than 160 papers in various scientific journals. His most recent book is Strategies for the Future. Books are Strategies for the Future, Mysteries in Management, Finland, India Business Opportunities, and the Constitutional Law of Nepal. In addition to other things, he was my professor at IIM Calcutta. So it's my honor to introduce him to all the participants and audience of this talk. Welcome, Professor Mathur, once again. Thanks for accepting this request for delivering this talk, and it's all yours. We'll have your talk followed by questions and answers for around 20 to 25 minutes or so. Thank you.
Sanjay, how long would you like me to speak? Would it be okay if around 45 minutes?
Yeah, that's perfectly fine.
Because I'd like to leave as much time as possible for interaction.
Sure, sure, sir.
Okay. So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Very warm welcome to all of you who have tuned in this Saturday evening and spared your time to join us in this webinar. I would like to thank Sanjay Verma for inviting me for this webinar. As he mentioned, he and I go back a long time in the world of learning from my IIM Calcutta days, and now we are colleagues at IIM Ahmedabad. I work in the strategy and economics areas, as Sanjay has already mentioned, and this is the area that's replete with lots of mysteries. And it's always exciting when there are mysteries because it's when we don't know that we need to inquire and do research. Why would we need to inquire and do research if we knew everything? Because knowing and inquiring are actually mutually exclusive. When we don't know, that's when we inquire, and when we are not sure, we inquire. And when we have something to go upon, we produce working hypotheses until we can improve on them and create more learning. So what I'd like to do is, in these 45 minutes that I want to use in introducing the mysteries in management to you, I'd like to share with you the most exciting news that I have had this year from the Academy of Management. For the first time, 2 issues of the Academy of Management Learning and Education Journal, the March issue and the September issue, which is just about coming out, have been devoted to the whole question of how little we actually know in management and how problematic it has been to claim that we have done important pieces of research and published and have a lot to say. The reality is that there's a lot more that we don't know compared to what we do know. And that's exciting for those of us who are entering the world of inquiry and management. But it's also very humbling for those who have been pretending that we know so much that in 2 years we can package into an MBA program everything that a student would need to know for the rest of his life to solve all the possible problems there are in management. Now, that is the kind of belief that this idea that there are mysteries in management actively seeks to dispel. The March and September issues of the Academy of Management, Learning and Education this year are remarkable because there's a lead article by Dennis Turish who points out that management studies are in crisis. And I've also taken that title as the title of the first slide that I'm sharing with you. What is questionable now is the relevance of research that has been happening in management. First of all, we have the problem that there has been a proliferation of business schools around the world. There are thousands of them all over the world, and even in India. From a time when Sanjay and I were in the IIM Calcutta, there were only 2 IIMs at that time, then became 3. Now there are more than 20. So when the institutions expand, so does work, in the sense that people write articles, they do research, they publish. But are we really closer to understanding the way society functions the way it does? Do we understand the way people behave the way they do? If there is more research being published in a greater number of journals than ever before, what is being covered and what is being left out is also worth looking at. And luckily, I invite your attention to these 2 issues of the Academy of Management, Learning and Education Journal this year that point out that more has been written than is actually known, and more has been published than could have been claimed to have been discovered or found out. Among the most illustrative examples that Dennis Turish brings to us are 2. One, that in the web of science, if you do a search and you look at the term climate change or climate crisis, barely 0.28% of the published research in management relates to the climate crisis and sustainability problems. And if you look at the period after 1990. Similarly, if you look at the words financial crisis, of which we have had quite many, you'd be surprised that there isn't a single article published on financial crisis in any management journal until 2008. Nobody anticipated the crisis, and there was nothing that management theory had to tell us about that. There are lots of areas in management where we still don't know. And these are important areas. Let me just give you a few examples. There is no management theory that can definitely guide us about how to optimally partition tasks in any organization. We have nothing in management theory to tell us how to design organization structures, or even how to strike a balance between the needs of management or the imperatives of control, or even how to align systems that would provide reasonable certainty together with structures and processes which could sustain harmony. Similarly, in related fields, management and economics, if you look at it in a combined sort of way, it is rather surprising that there is no model for knowing what relative prices and wages would produce full employment equilibrium. There is absolutely no way of knowing which aspects of a deregulated market could bite back when downward spirals become unstoppable. When India's GDP rate doubled from what used to be the so-called Hindu rate of growth of 4%, it became 8%. And now it seems that this year we are back to even below the so-called Hindu rate of growth because it's been shrinking for the last 4 years. And post-COVID, we face exceptionally difficult situations. But the period I'm looking at is the period when post-liberalization, after there was a spurt in Indian growth, you'd be surprised that not a single economist was able to predict that the India's GDP growth rate would go up from 4% to any higher figure. Not one. So when we actually look at the kind of issues that we become concerned with and the kind of learning that we would like to see happen in the world of knowing, we have to really very humbly ask ourselves, what are we doing and what is management that we profess and we practice? So the first thing I would like to do is to go over what is management, because management itself has 4 different connotations. The first of these is quite obvious when we speak of the Indian Institute of Management. We are talking of management as a body of knowing or skills, or a body of which constitutes a discipline of a kind. But that's not the only way the word management is used. We also use the word management as a collective noun to refer to a set of people who are supposedly the management in an organization. And often, when we look at cases in the case pedagogy, our concern is with the protagonists, that how would the so-called management deal with this problem? Now, quite apart from the fact that it ignores a whole lot of stakeholders who are concerned with the same case and the same issues, and our primary focus seems to be on the so-called protagonist. But the issue is much wider, that even the protagonist, is it so that we could focus on 1 or 2 key figures and say, just because these people have been entrusted with the responsibility as CEO or as a manager, that they constitute what we may call the management? Because then what we are saying is that everybody else at every other level is not management, but is managed. And can anybody be managed? And that is the third sense in which we can also use the word management, as we often say that, have you managed him? Have you managed her? Which really means that, have you manipulated her? Have you coerced her? Have you somehow been able to convince that person to behave in a way that you want that person to behave? So that's, have you managed him? But that's the third set of meanings that comes from management. And very often agency theory, which has been so popular in the last 30 years, and which Sumantra Ghoshal did so much to debunk. In fact, his last posthumously published paper is about how the bad management theories could be driving out good management practices. And his contention was that if agency theory assumes that managers are generally shirkers and they would not be self-motivated to do the right thing for the sake of doing good work, then what kind of theory are we propagating, and where do we reach as a result of this? And I'll come back to this in just a while. So having dealt with 4 different connotations of management, why mysteries in management? The incentives for ordering, producing, and standardizing quick fix solutions has been around. We want quick fixes for everything. Now, when you apply quick fix solutions to all kinds of management problems, why are we doing that? Often we have to acknowledge that this happens because people are defending against anxieties associated with not knowing, so that you clutch on to a little knowing and pretend that we know. Now, that's a very dangerous thing. Just think of what would happen if you went to a doctor with a symptom and the doctor found one reason which could explain your symptom and was satisfied and said that, oh yes, I know what's bothering you. Here are some medicines. Here is my prescription. Here is my bill. Now go and be happy. Now imagine that a patient could have more than one illness. A patient may have one symptom, but that symptom could be arising out of many, many different problems. So if a doctor were not to look at all the possible things that could be wrong with the patient, because a patient can have as many diseases as a patient is capable of having, a doctor would not be doing his job if the doctor did not diagnose what was wrong with the patient. It's the same in management. If we clutch on to a little bit of knowing, we could wreak incalculable havoc on the capacity of practitioners and scholars for purposefully engaging with worthwhile inquiries, we might also then be extraordinarily reluctant to admit that what we don't know about management is rather large. And what is worst is that as educators, we might collude with students in upholding that we have fortified them with all the knowledge and skills and frameworks and techniques that are available, and they would now be able to go out into the world and apply them and solve all the possible problems that they would come across. So I think what we need to really step back and look at is that what we have is not a treasure trove of knowledge. We need to constantly ask ourselves what knowing is most worth. The word mystery is significant because if you look at its origins in Rahasya or in Greek, in Moen, or Mysterium in Latin, the idea, even in our Vedas, was of the Shruti tradition by which any intergenerationally transmitted wisdom would have to be constantly re-verified in a contemporary way before being passed on. So the Vedas, the very word Vedas, is to bind that which cannot be bound, to acknowledge that the possibilities of knowing are infinite, that in the finite representations and discrete ways in which we bring about some knowing, we need to constantly check whether what we knew to be true yesterday, is it still true today? So there can be contradictions because fixing insights about anything to an express form at a given point in time contextually freezes the knowing. But knowledge has no limits and it's always evolving. So this is where the problem arises because thinking always implies a degree of not knowing. And we need to be careful that teaching could become a formidable defense against learning if it is organized around instruction involving a finite range of discrete solutions, products or outcomes, because we may then miss out on the experiential elements of discovery. So let me talk about, in knowing of most worth, what are the categories of knowing, and then I'll give you some examples, and then we'll come back to how we created this course called Mysteries in Management at IIM in 2011-12. So it's been 10 years since we've been organizing a MBA elective for the second year students. And we've now extended that in the EPGP program as an elective also to our distance learners. And of course, now there's a book on the course also that's available, but I'll come back to that in just a while. Let me first talk about the three categories of phenomena that we can know about. First of all, there are cosmic phenomena which involve natural forces, such as gravity, light, the movement of the stars and planets, the seeding of life, where human capacity to influence the nature of phenomena is limited. And not all of the nature has been yet exposed to our questioning. For instance, we know very little about the dark matter in the universe, and the physicists are the first to acknowledge that. We now know of the existence of hundreds of planets. Just about 4 or 5 decades ago, we were led to believe that the total number of planets was only 9, and they were all in our solar system. Now, at the turn of the millennium, the human genome was also decoded, and the functions of various genes we still don't understand. But what we do know in the life sciences or in the physical sciences or in chemistry, all this can be learned scientifically by anybody who cares to repeat an experiment or an investigation under controlled conditions. So the truth will eventually come out. So even if someone makes a mistake, like believing that the earth is flat, firstly, it will not change the shape of the earth as a geoid. Secondly, sooner or later, it will be discovered that it is actually geoid and it's round. But that's only for the first category of phenomena. In the second category of phenomena, we have a problem. These are the earthly phenomena concerning our habitats, natural environment, which are subject to change with human agency. In other words, we could make a difference to them, and that's why we talk of having entered an anthropomorphic era, because the habitats, natural environment, through human ingenuity of discovery, invention, animal agency, or the interplay of the flow of natural elements like fire, wind, sunlight, water, soil, electricity, magnetism, minerals, we can make a change to what is happening. Humans can fortify themselves with building dams, harvesting water, cultivating lands, burning forests, making tools, etc., etc. Now here, if a wrong theory gets propagated, there's an increasing returns phenomena that can be exhibited. And therefore, because of the path dependence that is introduced, something that is wrong or something that is inferior can actually persist as the best. And a few examples would be in order. For example, all of you probably know that the QWERTY keyboard, which we all type on, most of us at least, it is not the most efficient way of organizing keys on a keyboard. But it was deliberately chosen to slow down the speed of typing in the era when having the most efficient organization of keys would have jammed the keys more often, because the quality of the metal and the working and the mechanical appliances of that period could not go for such a fast speed of typing. So we have a path dependence, and we continue to use the same QWERTY keyboard. Similarly, when VHS prevailed over Betamax, Betamax was definitely the superior technology. But once VHS format had come in, then VHS became the rave, and due to the phenomena of increasing returns, for the first time we began to look at markets where the first mover has such an advantage, or the winner takes all, or certain markets induced by technology where there is not a scope for more than one or two players at most. So you get situations where industrial duopolies prevail. Now here we have a serious problem if something is chosen as an inferior solution or put forward as the answer to a problem prematurely. Because here what can happen is that the error can persist for a long time. Then there's a third category of knowing, which is where the danger is greatest. These are the institutional organizing phenomena around social, cultural, political, psychological, economic, and military organizations, and these involve all kinds of human civilizational endeavors. And we have to worry about this because despite there existing a variety of forms, most management activity actually consists of two kinds. One that is involved with efficient allocation of resources, which are scarce and have alternative uses. And the second, which is concerned with the management of flows of resources, which is the fourth definition of management that I can now introduce when we talked about what is management. Management is also about flows of resources, including information and responses across boundaries of one kind or another. Now, it is here that we don't get straightforward answers to questions because there can be multiple ways of organizing. Traditions may persist, conventions may dominate, innovations may disrupt, norms may develop, conflicts may sprout, systems may develop or deteriorate, structures may evolve or disintegrate, processes may flourish or perish. There is no definite outcome that can be predicted in socio-technical systems. Even the best technical system, for example, the long wall method of coal mining, it failed. And the transition from two-loom to four-loom in the textile industry was a very painful one, although the four-loom was the more efficient system. So similarly, it doesn't necessarily follow that a technologically superior solution would last or be adopted. The scale and complexity of phenomena can actually defy understanding because it can be associated with the incapability to sense through sight, sound, smell, taste, or touch about what's happening due to unconscious processes. And therefore, mysteries can remain for a long time because here the challenge is to be able to make visible the invisible, to be able to convert what is tacit and unarticulated into an expressible form and to enable enactment of what is withheld. So if you're able to give attention to a phenomenon which is happening in management, then we open up the possibilities of transformation. Now, the synthesis of what we know and the analysis of what we don't know rest on assumptions we can't take for granted. Often, people provide us with very simple ways of looking at things. Let me show you a picture that was an ad of a company that no longer exists. Here was a company promising you solutions, saying that you can be both big and nimble. And look where they are themselves. The military paradigm of VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, it pervades our consciousness because there are judgments involved, not only decisions. And some of these judgments require understanding interest groups, power groups, motivations, power bases, and they also involve what a long time ago Weaver of Shannon and Weaver fame had called organized complexity. Organized complexity means that the characteristics of any structure exhibiting such properties are determined not only by the elements comprising it and the relative frequency with which they occur, but also from the manner and elements, how they get to be interconnected. Now, this was pointed out by Hayek in his famous Nobel Prize lecture. His entire lecture after winning the Nobel Prize was devoted to talking about the pretense of knowledge. Now, the situation is much worse at the level of the firm in management. If you look at the false management theories, especially those that are presented very simplistically in 2x2 boxes, as if you can decide everything in a 2x2 box, these can crowd out very sound management concepts as well as robust management practices. This is what Ghoshal had complained about. Now, just as counterfeit currency drives out good currency, one can also look at Gresham's law, not only in economics, but also in management, that there are a lot of management ideas, bad ideas can flourish and founder. For example, one of the bad ideas that has taken root in many companies is the idea of rank and yank. The idea that every year you should evaluate people into 4 quartiles and the bottom 25% should be thrown out. Now, GE practiced this, so did Enron, and so did many other companies that, so they became like icons for this kind of practice. But this practice itself has no empirical basis that would suggest that this produces enhanced employee motivation or even performance. So we ought to be very careful about claims about management know-how and know-why, so that what one may call pseudo-profound bovine excreta does not circulate, and we ourselves are able to keep our nose away from it. Now, Zarniawska, who had done a lifelong of work in management in Sweden, was among the first to point out that there is actually a conflict between what we know as researchers, even when we do sound research and are able to come up with decent working hypotheses, that there's a difference between what we know and what we teach. And that difference arises because our teaching and our curriculum is often influenced by the pressure of corporate employers who say that, look, I want students to have usable knowledge and skills. So I want to have a say in what you will teach. I also want to have a say in how it will be taught. And I also want to have a say in what the students will then be able to do with what has been taught. Now, this is very problematic. It's problematic because every kind of knowledge is usable. Use is not a characteristic of knowledge. Use is a characteristic of the user. Since every kind of knowledge is usable, if somebody wants to use tarot cards or astrology, they're welcome to do that. But that would not make it a sound management practice, necessarily, unless it were proven that there was a way of doing it through those means. So should we be actually learning to raise relevant questions, or should our focus be on what we would like to believe, but which is completely untrue? So we have also a problem here. It is with this in mind that when we began to observe many black holes in management, for example, we noticed that when a group size is below 7, there is so much anxiety that the performance of the group is affected. But we were not able to understand why this is so. It was a mystery. In some ways, it's still a mystery, but we have some inkling that before a group size reaches 7, there is anxiety that the group experiences, that the group does not feel that it is stable and sustainable. We call this the thanatos anxiety, the death instinct, which prevails, and a lot of anxiety among the 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 people who form that so-called group affects performance. In fact, it's been empirically shown long before I raised this question of why 7 is optimal, that small companies, when their size of people involved is 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, their performance is definitely inferior to when the size is 7+. We also notice, for example, that between 7 and 12, a team functions best. So we say that 7 is a lucky number. It really is lucky because if you are at 7 or even 8 or 9 or 10 or 11 or 12, which are equally lucky, between 7 and 12, teams function very well. They function cohesively. They're able to function as a group so that they no longer function in an interpersonal way. But you add a 13th person and you have immediately a problem. So 13 is indeed unlucky in that sense, because the moment you add a 13th member to any team or group or even a board of directors, you can expect disaster. And we have seen empirically in company after company, there are companies which have for a while had 13 directors, and these companies have gone into all kinds of problems during those periods. There are several examples of this that can be cited. So these kind of issues, they are mysteries because they are not really puzzles. They are eternal mysteries because puzzles do get solved. It's mysteries that don't get solved. It is mysteries that we have to really ponder over and really try to grapple with and try to unravel. Because any kind of puzzle, including crosswords and jigsaw puzzles, they may require a lot of thinking, but they are basically about locating information, and then you fill out the incomplete patterns and you're able to get an answer. In contrast, any mystery requires inquiring into understanding the logic underpinning the patterns. And you might actually have only partially revealed patterns for making judgments, calls of discernment. Let me give you another example. Anywhere in the world, throughout history, we have never had a women majority parliament. The only circumstance in which Cuba and Rwanda produced women majority parliaments were when there were quotas introduced. But short of actually assigning quotas and observing affirmative action in a structured way, no parliament anywhere in the world has ever produced a women majority parliament. And this is a mystery. It's a mystery because there are some obvious answers that one can come up with, which are all wrong. So let me give you a few of the obvious answers. One obvious answer is that, oh, there are not enough women who are educated. Then all you have to do is you have to look at labor force participation rates and 100% literate societies, for example, in the Nordic countries. But even they have not been able to produce a women majority parliament. We can't say that patriarchy is such an enduring feature in 100% literate, liberated societies. There are several of them, but they've never produced a women majority parliament. We also can't say that a parliamentarian's job is such that men can do it better. There is no rational argument that can be advanced to suggest that. So whatever faculties are involved in the role, they are susceptible to equal treatment by men and women, but we don't really see that blossoming out. So when we find a continuous distortion, it's a mystery. We still don't know. Now, this is one of the mysteries that I have also discussed every year in my class, but I've also uh, shared my own thinking and the contemporary research on this, questions of gender equity, diversity, inclusivity, even as the chair of the Center for Gender Equity, Diversity, Inclusivity, over 5 to 6 years, we engaged with all kinds of experts, with women in different roles, in different setups. We've looked at this to be able to wonder what could we do and what is it that we were missing. But we are not very much closer. This remains a mystery. We still don't know. A few other mysteries. Why do nations compete? We know for a fact that, and rationally it can be shown, that all the countries of the world, if they were to collaborate, the world would be better off, every country would be better off, every person on the planet would be better off. And yet the dominant modality of relating is competing. So there are lots of such mysteries, and that is what we need to really pay attention to. Now, puzzles are often satisfactorily solved, but mysteries, except for the whodunit kind of detective fiction, mysteries can remain unthought, unexplained knowns for pretty long periods. Now, this is frightening because if knowledge is to be distinguished from information, it may even be considered a bit shameful that in this day and age of Google and Wikipedia, we are saying that there are mysteries which we are still holding up to be mysteries because we are no closer to solving them. So what are these mysteries, and why are they mysteries? As technology advances, many aspects of our lives are changing. Look at this. We are going headlong sometimes into collisions, like these pilots in this picture, who are probably posing for some kind of a photograph in the cockpit. As technology advances, would we even have pilots in the cockpit? It's a question that we must ask, because if we can have driverless vehicles, can we have pilotless aircrafts? Can we imagine? So there is also the power of imagination that drives technologies. Now, there are people who have been speculating that if technology advances to a stage where it would be safer to have a pilotless aircraft and not to have a situation like what is depicted in this picture, then what would happen in the cockpit? You might still probably need a pilot in uniform for the sake of comfort of the passengers. But you might also need a dog to keep company to the pilot. And the only function of the pilot really would be to feed the dog. And the only function of the dog would be to make sure that the pilot does not touch the controls in any way, because the machine is supposed to be doing all the flying. So we can visualize and imagine futures in a very different way. Some mysteries are also interesting and are very basic in nature. Look at this. If you look at the water use in the world, the water use per capita doesn't seem to follow any pattern. It's not as if the countries that are more developed use more water. If you look at Switzerland here in this diagram, it's using the least water. It also doesn't follow any pattern of whether water would be more used if it was more available. So if water use, a basic thing like water, consumption of which is not predictable either by affluence or by availability of water, then what will explain this? Now, this is interesting because it raises the thought that can we really have management which is universal? There has been a lot of thought in the last 40 years. There was this idea of Japanese management that came when the automobile industry was in crisis. And when banking crisis took place in the 1980s and 90s, it was at one point, 10 of 10 biggest banks in the world were Japanese. And in automobiles, the Japanese automobile manufacturers were dominating the American ones. So people began to wonder whether there is something very special about Japanese management. Similarly, people have wondered whether there is an Indian management style. And every now and then, we have a conference organized to look at whether there is such a thing as an Indian management style. Now we do know, for instance, that there's an American style of policing. We have a Black Lives Matter movement born out of that because there is an American style of policing. But is there an American style of management? And if there are these national styles of management, or if there are differences, then what is universal about management and what is less universal about management? That itself remains something of a mystery. Sometimes pictures can be muses of a very special kind and give rise to mysteries. Let me give you an example. Take a look at this. This is a monkey that is washing utensils in a dhaba in Assam. He comes regularly to this dhaba. He washes utensils. The dhaba owner gives him 2 bananas, and then he goes away happy. When I saw this picture published in a newspaper, it made me think that there's a very important question that we need to ask as economists and as managers. How low can wages fall? In this instance, the wages have fallen to 2 bananas. If wages fall very low and there's no floor, then how low could they actually fall? We could actually land up in a society of chattel slavery before we've even realized that we ought to intervene and do something about it, because the market system of clearing clears at such an obnoxious level or a threshold that it defies all civilized aspects as we know them. So the whole question of human dignity, human worth, human purpose, and civilization becomes then a question mark. So I think that we have a lot to look at in terms of mysteries in management, and I'll just give you a flavor of some of the other mysteries, and I'll also then share with you what we've been doing here in the course. Among one of the mysteries that we've been looking at is whether emotions in organizational life, whether they're a nuisance, a disturbance, or whether they're a sign of intelligence of some kind that we need to pick up to be able to sharply address the toxicities that might be lurking. Similarly, a lot of the time when we look at how much a manager should be paid, we ought to really be looking at whether managerial productivity is measurable. By the way, this is a question that was the subject of a 5-year research project set up by the Asian Productivity Organization, Tokyo. I participated in that project, and even after 5 years, we were not any closer to the answer. It's a mystery as to what is managerial productivity. And how do you measure managerial productivity in an organization? Is it really measurable? The closest we came to it was that it seems to have something to do with the way of knowing. So organizations that are able to organize a knowing dynamism and be able to pick up signals from the unconscious processes are probably doing better in the productivity of management as a process. But we were still not able to identify at an individual level whether you could measure managerial productivity. Similarly, the jury is still out on whether strategies are to be invented or they can also be discovered, because it's been found that a lot of strategies in organizations can also be discovered in dreams that the top management might have. If the top management were to share those dreams every morning, even for half an hour with each other, and try to puzzle through as to what it is that the muse was bringing them in the night. Because our dreams, which we have always thought as individual processes, because each of us dreams individually, we sleep individually, but people who work together and have a boundary of connecting them together tend to have dreams that also show interconnections in the unconscious. In other words, when people start sharing dreams from a group or a team, you discover that somebody dreamt one fragment, somebody else dreamt another fragment, and it's only when you put together the fragments that you can see the whole dream. Although every person thinks that his or her dream was a whole and a full dream. But you also get fragmented dreams and you can put them together. And when you can put them together, you can actually get strategies. You'd be surprised that platform economy, which is so much in fashion these days, the word platformation itself happens to be a trademark. So even though the FANG economies, the Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Google, Netflix, they are the major players in the platform economy. But the word platform, the word platformation is an intellectual property right of a company in Bangalore called Sonata. Sonata Software has been working with IIM Ahmedabad for the last 8 years. And every year I take them on a retreat. The top management team, I take them for a retreat. And in one of the top management retreats that we had 7 years ago, they were able to see that the strategy of the company would be about platformation. And even the word platformation came out of that retreat, and they went and immediately applied for a trademark and they registered it. It's an intellectual property right of Sonata. They are the ones who own the word platformation. And they do it not because they consciously thought of it, but because it came to them from the unconscious in some of the harmony sensing matrices we do for social dreaming in top management retreats. To look at the power of what are the mysteries that are lurking and what we can dwell in. Let me end with just one more example, and then I'll talk about the course and then I'll take questions. You may have noticed that the popularity and effectiveness of leaders always declines with passage of time. Have you wondered why? I mean, there's even the joke that a great leader once upon a time called the Postmaster General and said that, look, I've been in office for 6 years, 7 years, 8 years. Shouldn't there be a postage stamp with my face on it? So after a month, the Postmaster General goes back to the leader and says that, I'm so sorry that we will not be able to have a postage stamp with your face on it. The reason is that we have actually tried out, we have had a trial, but people are spitting on the wrong side. So it won't stick. So we won't be able to get your postage stamp to stick and it'll create problems. But the idea behind it is the same, that we know that leaders lose their charisma, no matter how charismatic a leader, when elected. All charisma and all popularity is about projections that are made by the followership. It's not an attribute of the leader. Just like knowledge does not in itself decide how it will be used. That's the user who decides. Similarly, the electorate, the followership decides who to vote for or who to recognize and hail as a leader. So there are things like that which we still are very far from understanding the processes about. And what we've been doing at IIM is that we've been encouraging students. After we launched this course, we take in firstly a limited number of students, initially only 50 in a class. And we say that, all right, we'll introduce you to a few mysteries that are known mysteries, which we have not been able to unravel. We are doing this to remind you that there are lots of things that you may have come across in your 2 years of studies at IIM Ahmedabad, which may have raised questions in your mind, which have not been answered, not by yourself, not by your teachers, not by the books, not by the research that you read. Can you flag these issues which you consider to be mysteries? Now remember that these mysteries are not just because you don't know. That is pure ignorance. Because if somebody else knows or if something is known, that's not a mystery for the only reason that you don't know what this is. But it's a mystery if nobody knows. So we look at those issues and those questions that we can observe in the phenomena, but which we have no explanations about, like the ones that I shared with you. So once these mysteries have come out, it's the task of the students. Each student has to bring 5 mysteries to the class. And in the process, in the last 10 years that we've been collecting mysteries, our inventory of ignorance has really expanded. We have such a large number of mysteries. Initially, even I had thought that maybe we'll end up with a saturation at about 100 or 200. But within a few years, we had 500. we now have more than 1,000 mysteries. And they are mysteries because they have not been unraveled. We have even discussed them in the classes, and we have still not been able to unravel them. But the fact that we do spend time in dwelling in wonder out of curiosity into the world of not knowing enriches us, because it reminds us that we have to always be looking for ways of inquiring into that phenomena which may be knowable, but which we don't know about today. So when this course was being taught year after year, I was approached by my publishers who had published another book of mine, Strategies for the Future, Penguin Random House, and they persuaded me to write a book, because I initially was very reluctant, because I explained to them that we are dealing with hundreds and thousands of mysteries, and we are discussing these mysteries over a 3-month, 4-month period in the institute. So there's plenty of time and there's interactivity over these mysteries. But they persuaded me, so what I did is, I said, okay, what I can do is I can bring you a taste of the mysteries. So this book contains just 10 mysteries to introduce you to the nature of a mystery and to introduce you to why, despite so much research done on each of these mysteries that are in this book, there are only 10 mysteries that are discussed in 10 different chapters in this book. But at the back of the book, I have given you a list of another 50 mysteries that came out of the very first batch of students that we introduced mysteries in management to. So if you are interested in mysteries, do have a look at the kind of mysteries that we've been working on. And if you have mysteries to introduce to us, I would be delighted to hear from you. You can certainly share with me any mysteries that you would like us to bring to class or to discuss. And you're welcome to come and interact with us on the mysteries that we don't yet have and the ones that we could still be adding to our inventory of ignorance. So I'll pause here. Where do we go from here? Any thoughts, any suggestions, any comments, any questions?
Sir, thanks a lot. Very interesting, very thought-provoking. We have some questions that are coming up. I would request Amit Gupta to please introduce and ask his question, sir. Followed by Yatish and Dinesh. All of you who want to ask questions should come online and ask the question themselves.
Thank you, sir. This is Amit Gupta, sir. I handle organizational development at Indian Oil Corporation. Very insightful discourse, sir. You at the beginning mentioned about that there are no theories and the mysteries about organizational structure. And towards the end, sir, you talked about the mystery of managerial productivity. But sir, at corporate level, these are the two harsh realities that we have to deal with. So how do the decision makers handle this? While from a research perspective, these continue to remain mysteries.
Excellent question, Amit. I will respond to you. Let me take a few more questions.
Sure, sir. Yatish Pandey, Dinesh Saxena. And sir, we'll take 3 at a time. Otherwise, we'll forget the first question.
Yeah, sir, good evening, sir. This is Yatnesh. We always heard about this. There is a strategy, execution, hard work, but there is a luck or randomness involved in result. So is it, sir, this luck or randomness is a mystery? Do we have any kind of the phenomena to understand what is the randomness or luck is there in any kind of the execution, especially in the management side?
Excellent question again. I will definitely respond. And I'm not losing track of the questions. I'm writing them down.
Thank you, sir.
You didn't introduce yourself. Where are you working?
So I'm working for one of the marketing area into the one of the paint company based out of Bombay. And we keep doing a lot of the execution and plan, but somewhere the team always come with something we missed out due to the luck. So I'm also not able to answer this too. So I'm trying to explore this mystery in management.
Okay, I can give you an example from the paint industry itself, but which paint company are you working from?
So I'm taking care of the marketing in Narrow Lake Paints.
Okay, all right. I'll respond to you. Yeah. Let's take the third question.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So this is Dinesh Saxena. I'm a faculty at in the Department of Hospital Administration in Subharti University, Meerut, Uttar Pradesh. And now it is, firstly, I must pay my regards and respect to you, because you have all added a new dimension in the management. The mysteries do exist. So far, we had whatever we had been teaching the students, we believe that this is the ultimate and this is the final solution. But now everything is in this array. So my question is, sir, that shall we ever able to find a perfect solution to these mysteries or these situations of management, like organization is predicting outcomes, predict. So how I'm a bit confused. Where do we go now from here?
Okay, so let me take these three questions, then we can take some more. I'll quickly respond. The first question is from Amit Gupta, IOC. Yes, Amit, this is one of the difficulties that we recognize, that there is no management theory that guides us about structure. So what do? What we do is we try to look at why does a structure arise and what is the function of a structure. In my understanding, a structure is nothing but a set of interconnected roles. And a set of interconnected roles, each of which will have its own role purpose, would not arise until the primary task of a system had been located. And the moment you locate a primary task of a system, it's worth asking that does it have only a normative primary task? For example, an IOC might be said to have the primary task of refining oil and marketing it, and so that the value addition that you're doing is it can only be in 3 stages: in exploring, refining, and marketing. And if each of these 3 are integrated activities, then there are role holders, and there are systems and subsystems, each of which will have their own primary task. Marketing will have its own primary task, the refineries will have their own, and exploration will have its own. So the task drives roles, and the interconnection of role drives structure. This much we know, but we still don't know what would be an optimal structure in terms of span of control. Now, if you remember, this idea of span of control goes back to Colonel Erwick around World War I, because he observed that in the army, it was very useful not to have more than 5 in a platoon. The idea was that if you want to control 5 people, you can do it only with 5 plus 1. The moment you have 6 plus 1, you can't control, because then the interpersonal element is lost. You can't maintain hierarchy. You won't have order. The group will have a life of its own. So when we create structure in civilian organizations, we have the opposite in mind. We actually want the team to function. We don't want it to be an insular order command operation. So except for those parts of the organization that require insularity, like firefighting, but if you require teamwork, then you need more than 7. So you also need less than 13. So at least these guiding elements are there in designing how role linkages will be set up and how you will organize the relationships of information flow so that the functionalities of the responses in the organization can be carried out. I'm afraid there is no answer to the question of managerial productivity. It's impossible to know that how productive is an individual. You can only look at a role purpose and be clear about why a particular position exists. And you can be absolutely sure that if the position has only functions like to assist so-and-so, to supervise so-and-so, to monitor so-and-so, or to control so-and-so, or to coordinate, these are positions you can blindly eliminate completely. The organization won't even miss them. So if you can find a value-adding function in any position, only then create a role purpose. And if your role purpose is okay, then you don't need to measure. Don't worry about, not everything that is valuable can be measured. But as long as what you're doing is logical and the people are responsible, you will be able to see how well people are engaging in the role purpose. And for that, you can have key result areas. but that doesn't necessarily help you understand how productive a manager is. And that limitation we still have. Coming to Yatnesh, excellent idea that is there luck? Yes, of course. But you know, fortune favors the prepared mind. So even when Kekulé dreamt the structure of benzene, or when the founder of Novo Nordisk, who found out about how to synthesize insulin, this guy, he dreamt it. It came to him in the unconscious because he was working very hard to find out about what can be done to synthesize insulin, and he had failed. So in the night, he had a dream that he dreamt about dogs whose testicles were tied by strings. And because he was working on insulin, he tried that experiment in his lab. He tied the testicles of some dogs, and finally he was able to get insulin. Eventually, of course, it was bovine or porcine insulin from cows and sheep or pigs that was used until insulin got synthesized fully. But even natural insulin as a discovery, it didn't happen. It was a piece of luck. But the luck happened because the person was already prepared to receive that nugget of luck. Now, there are many things that can happen by random walk. And random walk is a well-known idea in management and also in economics. But we have not found any evidence that random walk is better than a purposive walk. Luck can arise, yes. And luck is certainly worth investigating. There are some people who are absolutely lucky. I mean, look at people like Mountbatten. Mountbatten, he's so lucky. He eventually became the viceroy in India. But in his naval career, when he was in Malta, he had gone on shore when his entire ship got sunk. He was the only one who escaped. Was that luck? Yes, it was luck, because he could not have controlled for that factor. So there are many factors which we can't control for. And those factors that we can't control for and come out better because the uncontrollable worked out to our advantage would certainly be luck. The third is Dinesh Saxena's question about how do you take decisions under uncertainty? Yes, this is an issue. I'm afraid, especially in hospital administration, where you are taking decisions, and those decisions have to be made, whether or not the data is in. And later on, the data may show that the decision taken was right or wrong. This is where most people who take decisions by the seat of their pants or by their intuitions, or what managers call their gut feeling, it's nothing but the capacity that arises in people who have experience with any arena of knowing or any arena of expertise, where the patterns that you are unconsciously picking up are already speaking to you. So there is an unconsciously arising intuitive grasp of a situation, which is actually arising from a lot of data around you, but you're not aware of it. But just because you're not aware of it, you can still rely on it. And much of the time, people who take decisions out of intuitive belief, they're actually handling much more data than would have been possible to put through a data processing machine. But their own internal systems have been able to do it. By the way, it has now been discovered that this so-called idea of the gut feeling is not untrue at all, because the human guts, the gut contains bacteria, and the gut is a second brain in the human system. That we talk of swarm intelligence, there is a certain kind of swarm intelligence in the gut, and there is a gut-brain axis that is currently being researched very intensively in the life sciences. Okay.
So there are many questions. Now I am reading 2 or 3 questions from Facebook because they are not online on Zoom. So there is a question from Anjani Rai, and I would read it. Would like to understand a statement mentioned. Corporate drives what is to be deliberated upon and how it is to be done, rather than researcher during various training sessions organized by corporates. What is the value addition of that training if only corporate philosophy drives such sessions? That's one question from Anjani. And Prince Vijay wants to know, how do you distinguish mystery from paradox in management practice?
What's the name of the person who wants to know?
Prince Vijay. Prince Vijay.
Prince Vijay. Okay. My answer I'll come to these two questions. Before that, my answer to Yatnesh was incomplete because I had promised to give him an example from the paint industry. Now, Yatnesh, you are working with Nerolac. I'm sure you would know of Asian Paints. Asian Paints has the amazing experience of being one of the first Indian multinationals. Like Bajaj Auto, they went abroad. They were among the first two companies to go and make foreign commercial presence. Almost every country that Asian Paints went to, they failed. Now, the reason they failed, you can say, was bad luck, because you were talking of luck. But if you really begin to understand why they failed, they sent their best people. And that's also really very sad, because some of their best talent went abroad to be country heads of those countries where Asian Paints internationalized. And when they failed, those people never could come back to Asian Paints in their old jobs. They all left the organization. But the real reason here was capable of being unearthed. So it's not a mystery. I would not call it a mystery. Behind this ill luck, we can see two factors. One is that the Indian paint industry did not have any products of its own which it could have patented. So it remained occupied with the bottom 5% of the market, which was being dealt with in those countries where the patented products were not being pushed. So it became possible for Asian Paints only to enter those markets where there was no competition from the developed country paint companies, and where they could never get more than 5% market share in any market, and that was the reason they failed. So there has to be a threshold engagement before you can succeed. So luck also favors the bold who go prepared. Coming back to this Anjana's the question of corporate and research, yes, of course. I think it takes a while before people become familiar and convinced that they can benefit from research. Because unless and until the people in corporations experience the goodness of research, the value of research, they would not believe in it. They would think of this as just another program done to keep managers happy that there's some training program going on, or there is some research activity that has been engendered. Most of the worthwhile research with companies takes the form of action research. It's participatory research where the knowing is co-created by the managers and the researchers together. It's not something that the researcher comes and acts upon the company, and it's not as if the company goes out and instructs the researcher how to find or what to find, because then you wouldn't need to do research. So I think it's very important to call something research and an inquiry when we are only dealing with those aspects that we really want to find out about, things that we consider quite important and worth knowing, and we are prepared to invest in a co-creation of the knowing. A company that is not prepared to invest in co-creation of the knowing would actually be outsourcing the knowing, and that doesn't work out. It doesn't work out with many kinds of knowing. It can only work out with information. You can always create contractors outside who can process information for you. But it's not possible to have the diagnosis or a co-creation of what's going on inside a company from the outside. Even external consultants will have to take the stance of being co-creators of knowing as action researchers. That's the stance we take. Now, Prince was talking about what is the difference between a mystery and a paradox. Let me give you a concrete example from the COVID times. Country after country during COVID has thought that they should introduce some kind of fiscal stimulus by reducing the tax liability of business community and firms and enterprises, because economic theory has guided them that if you reduce the tax rate, then you will have more investment. So country after country has followed fiscal stimulus in the way that they have reduced the corporate tax rate, or they have reduced the levy of taxes in one way or another in order to boost investments, in order to have multiplier effects on the employment and incomes. But has a single country in the COVID time succeeded through this method? And the answer is no. So now here is an example of a paradox, that you think that you have a theory and you go out with that theory and create a policy, and in the implementation you may have faithfully implemented, but you never got the outcome. And that's where the mystery part comes. So what is the mystery here? Why did it not happen the way it's supposed to happen? Because what actually happened, we know. What companies did is they saved the money from not paying the taxes that they would have otherwise paid. And by saving that money, they retired their debts. And by retiring their debts, they began to hold current assets. And by holding current assets, they increased their savings. But they did not invest. That's the phenomena that has actually happened. Now that's a mystery. We still don't know why. Why did the business world behave the way it did? When so many business leaders have gone on television, even in India, to appear to be almost sycophants of the government, to say that they are putting their hand up and saying what a great set of policies has been enacted, and they think that very soon the Indian economy would be booming again. And even those people who've been talking of the stock market, I'm sometimes surprised. And I could actually mention a few names. Mr. Kotak has been coming on the television quite often on various channels, and talking as if he can, by his motivation, walk up the stock market values in the belief that the stock market is about to rise. But evidence is otherwise. The Reserve Bank governor last week gave a warning that the stock market is due for a correction. So we should expect the stock market to fall. And it can fall 30 to 40%. So here is a paradox. You have two sets of opinions, one from the Governor Reserve Bank, another from Mr. Kotak. I'll give you another example. Naushad Forbes, ex-president CII, he wrote in the Indian Express last week that he thinks that the best way to come out of the current COVID is to have a new social contract, by which he means that this floor space index in metro cities like Bombay, Mumbai, should be increased to the same levels as Hong Kong and New York, which means that the FSI should be increased 5 times. And that will give a boost to construction activity, and there would be a kickstart to the economy, and everything would work out quite fine. That's the main idea that he has in his Indian Express middle. I don't think he even understands that the reason you can't have 70-story, 100-story buildings in a city like Mumbai is because in Indian cities, we don't even have firefighting equipment that will go that high. And we don't have electrical capabilities to do electrical installations safely without making infernos. And those of you who've been watching what's been happening with fires all around the country in hospitals and other places would know that it's a holistic thing. So the paradox is that people think that by making pushes in one sector or another, they can solve the whole problem. Whereas the world is interconnected. It affects us all, and we have to remember that we will have to dwell in the mystery of why we are not more connected, why our community is not functioning. Why is it that we only think in categories? In India, we think only in categories. We think of SC, ST, Dalits, we think of people who are migrants, non-migrants, we think of people who are poor, non-poor, people who are in this category, that category. But what about the communities in which people live and breathe? How come we are not organized as a society to invest in vibrant communities? That's a mystery to me. And I've been thinking about that why is it that in India we don't have civil communities of habitat? And how is it that we also don't have civil communities of practice where professionals could get together and create their communities of practice and also be enriched and contribute to society in a bigger way? So we lack both. We lack communities of habitat, communities of practice, and that's a mystery to me.
Sir, you mentioned about two companies. I would request Mr. Rajiv Kumar Jena to please come online and introduce and ask it. Sir, you're on mute. Rajiv Sahab, you're on mute. Rajiv Sahab, you're on mute, please.
Yeah,
it's fine.
It's okay now.
Please introduce and ask your question.
Yeah. First of all, I mean, it was amazing, I'll continue to hear Professor Mathur all the time, what he's speaking, his eloquence, his knowledge. I mean, just my first, at the outset, my gratitude for giving this opportunity to listen to him. And it actually corroborates. I'm coming from spiritual aspects. Like, like Arjuna asked, he was also seeking. It was a mystery for him. Should I go and kill my own kith and kin? And supposedly a better theory came out from Lord Krishna, and he understood that and went ahead. So similar kind of, dilemma or crossroads we face in our life. I just, that particular thing which Sir had just touched about Enron and the G, we call neutron jack, where they used to take out the bottom 25% people all the time, every year. And we know what has happened to both the companies. Instead of actually flourishing in their relentlessness to pursue meritocracy, they could not, because again, we cannot divide societies into categories. And again, there's a collectiveness, there's a collective consciousness, and that gets damaged. And I find that, in Bajaj Autos, in the early days when we had 12,000 people who wanted to make it 50%, probably that strategy of butchering was okay. I mean, they wanted to take out. But now when we have talents, full of talents, again, you segment them, the bottommost and the topmost, the gap is so low, and yet this guy has to go out. Imagine, all the so it's creating a huge. And my question is that if somebody comes with a particular knowledge and he's applying that, it has got a huge impact on this. Do we have some way to understand the early impacts and take corrective actions? Because first, with our humbleness, we should know that we don't know, right? As you said, but we are experimenting. We get a knowledge, we try to find out and experiment, just driving a gadi. So can we do a course correction? Is there a way that in our way to unravel the mystery, we have a process of actually being resilient and do the course corrections? I hope I have put my questions properly, sir.
Sir, a small introduction, Rajiv sir. आपका थोड़ा आप बता दें.
I worked in two companies. I joined I graduated from NIT Rourkela in 1982. Then joined as a management trainee, 17th batch. My batchmate is currently the chairman of the company. And but 15 years after working in Softfloor, after doing MBA from IIM Bhubaneswar, I thought I will also go to the other side of the story and see how private sector works. So I joined Bajaj Auto as the first 5 employees to start the Greenfield project at Chakan plant. We wanted a radical change from the past, and we wanted to bring Japanese philosophy, Japanese culture, and lean management and Toyota production system. Halfway through that, about 4 to 5 years down the line, I got an opportunity to work on the IT and process re-engineering. So I led the manufacturing supply chain side, and I did that for 15 odd years to completely revamp our processes, deploy SAP and other IT related technology interventions to make it more productive in its approach to processes. Also started looking at front end and dealership and B2C markets, and also realigned the processes there. The whole last 15, 16 years, I have been actually deploying technology for process re-engineering. And I just superannuated just last month from Bajaj Auto.
Thank you, sir.
That's briefly my.
Rajiv ji, I'm very grateful to you for having shared and come in, and I can now see where you come from, because the Bajaj Auto, as I recalled, was like Asian Paints. These were the first two companies to work, first two Indian multinational companies, because they went abroad and they had a vision of doing new things that had never been done.
Yes, sir.
The question that you're raising, if I first look at that, I think it's such a talented person as you, who has been doing so many amazing things, it would strike you as quite an ordinary answer, but I think I can only give a very ordinary answer, which is that when I really look at the Bhagavad Gita, which you also looked at, I find that there are 7 dualities of human existence that the Bhagavad Gita deals with. And I recently published a paper on these 7 dualities in the Bhagavad Gita. And if you send me your email, I can mail you the paper.
Yes, sir.
It was published in a recent publication, which was about management insights from the Bhagavad Gita.
Okay,
so the whole collection in that book is of papers dealing with different aspects, and mine is about what can managers learn from Bhagavad Gita. But I think there are some amazing things that we can learn from the 7 dualities, because they show us that each of the dualities is present in a double form, in a dual form. So you have the idea and you have the shadow of the idea.
Yeah.
And both are present. And so you can't really work with only one of them. You have to transcend both of them to be able to deal with a single duality.
Yes.
Now, this also works out in the area of business, because in business, we often talk about economics as only organized around how people allocate scarce resources, which have alternative uses. But before we allocate scarce resources, having alternative uses and optimally utilize them, the question is that why are we doing this? And we are doing this because we are trying to actually move from one emotion state to another emotion state.
Yes, sir. Yes.
So another way of explaining management and economics would be, if we were to go back to the idea of, which is there in the Bharat Muni's Navrasas, that if you go back to the rasas were nothing but aesthetic states of crystallizations of human emotions. And the bundles of emotions, all of them are important. It's not that we work around only pleasure and pain. It's not only about happiness and sadness. It's about the whole range. It's like a rainbow.
Yeah, yes.
So if we look at the whole rainbow, the best decisions are taken when you have been able to experience the rasa that is evoked by an experience, but you have given yourself the possibility of retreating back into Shant rasa.
Okay.
So that you're not taking a decision in an emotion.
Yes.
But you are not denying the emotion, because you're using the emotion as a signal of intelligence. So it's bringing you some information. So the fact that I'm able to feel a certain emotion puts me in touch with what is happening inside of me, but also puts me in touch with what is happening outside of me in the outside world.
Yes.
And if I'm in touch and I'm aware of what is happening with my emotional state, and I let myself get back into the Shantrasa. So this is where, again, let me quote you a shloka from the Bhagavad Gita, which Krishna said to Arjuna, Sukha dukhe same kritva, labha labhau jaya jayo, tato yuddhaya yujjasva, naivam papam avapsasi. To those who would require a translation, keep the idea of sukh, happiness, and dukh, pain, as imposters alike.
Yes, both.
Treat both as imposters.
Yes,
Sukha dukhe same kritva.
yes,
If you are able to treat both as imposters, you would then be able to see that you would only get outcomes and victories. Labha labhau jaya jayu. Tato yuddhaya yujjasva. If you struggle in life's battles in this modality,
yes.
you don't actually incur any pap,
Oh,
because you are not acting
detached
you're not acting from a motive,
motive.
or you are not transferring an emotion, or you're not projecting a feeling into another person.
Yes,
So if you're not actually transmitting a poison anywhere, you are processing it inside of yourself. What can
yes.
be a higher value than this in a sage, and what can
True.
be a higher value than this in a CEO?
Yes.
One of the things that when I recruit CEOs, or when I help in recruiting CEOs to companies,
Yes, sir.
I look at only a few things. I'm not so worried about what the CEO achieved previously. I'm only concerned about 2-3 things. One is this person capable of tolerating ambiguity?
Beautiful. Beautiful, sir. Yes.
Because if a person is a CEO and not capable of tolerating ambiguity,
Yes.
people will push him or her into taking decisions
Yes.
when decisions should not be taken, and you should dwell in not knowing.
Hmm.
The capacity to dwell in not knowing is very important for a CEO.
Yes.
Only a CEO who can cope with the anxiety not to get pulled into taking a decision.
Yes.
Now, this doesn't mean that he should procrastinate forever.
No, he will
I'm not
take.
saying that. A
Yes.
decision should be taken when it is needed to be taken,
Yes. Not on the spot
not
of
until
it.
then.
Yes. Not
There's
really.
no need to take a decision earlier than that.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Until then, give yourself the opportunity to dwell in data, give yourself the
Yes.
opportunity to dwell in not knowing.
Fantastic.
And when you have to take a decision, take a decision.
Take it issue. Yes,
Sir,
sir.
there are. Thank you, sir. There are many questions. I will take last 3, then we'll stop. I will request Vishal Singh, Sanjay Garg, and let's say Suhas to come online and ask their questions, and we'll end with that, sir. Vishal Singh, Sanjay Garg, and Suhas.
Sanjay, may I request one more thing, that if we are not able to handle all the questions in this session,
Chief.
if the people who are asking questions, if they can provide their email, I'll be happy to reply to them by email even after this session.
Sure, sir. I will share your email address right now here, and then they can write to you also.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And you can
Yeah.
also let them give their email addresses, and I can also share with them after this session, and I can respond to them. But let me listen to Vishal, Sanjay, and Suhas.
Sanjay Garg, Suhas, and Vishal, please.
Yeah, may I ask a question, sir? My name is Sanjay.
Yes, Sanjay, go ahead.
Yeah, sir, my name is Sanjay Garg. I am working in BHEL, Bharat Heavy Electricals Limited, in export division of BHEL. First of all, sir, I would like to compliment Professor, sir, for expounding the like mysteries in management so nicely. And it is very, very humbling to know the limits of human knowledge, and to basically understand what we don't know is basically much more than what we know. So my like observation or question is that, sir, in management we are not dealing with basically physical law or chemical laws or biological law. In management, essentially we are dealing, apart from the land, capital, this thing, we are basically mainly dealing with human beings. So when we are dealing with human beings, we have to deal with human consciousness. And consciousness, sir, you know very well, it's a undefined thing. Nobody is able to fathom the consciousness, what are the levels of consciousness and how it works. So the basically very fact that the human consciousness is unknowable, infinite. So means mystery in management is bound to occur. Actually, we cannot know everything in management. and the mysteries will remain, because the human nature, the human consciousness is fundamentally means nobody will be able to know. So means a thing basically which we are sure fundamentally we will not be able to know. We should not try to like you can say worry about the full knowledge itself. Thank you, sir.
Okay, I can take that also as a comment, and I think it's a very enlightened comment. I mean, I'm reminded of my visits to BHEL, especially in your Hardwar unit, as well as in your corporate office now and then in the past. And I think one of the things that BHEL valued very early, since the 1970s, was that organization development is important. In fact, BHEL was one of the first companies in the country, and especially being a public sector enterprise. It had an OD unit as early as the 1970s. HMT was another one that had an OD unit as early as 1970s, but BHEL was one of them. I think it's important that if I take you back to your own BHEL and you say that, look, can you look at how the structure, system, and process in BHEL are connected? Because that is the consciousness which is collective in nature in the BHEL. All your entire structure of BHEL is built on the principle of reliability. That you will always have officers and managers who have a responsible reliability and they can rely on each other. So reliability, which is a function of structure, is very much met in BHEL. The second is that you go to any unit of BHEL, the way it's organized, there is a certainty in the system that this is what the inputs will be and this is what the outcomes will be. Now, whether you take a simple system like a performance appraisal system of BHEL, or whether you take the corporate planning system of BHEL, all BHEL systems have this characteristic that you've been able to look at your inputs and outcomes. And therefore, you're able to add value and create the certainty that is the property of a system. And the third is also very important, which is that management processes have not been short-circuited in BHEL. BHEL has believed in management processes, and so there's an aesthetic of harmony that is inbuilt. So all the three aspects of management, the trine of management, the reliability of structure, the certainty of system, and the harmony of processes is present. Now, what can be more conscious than that? And yet, if you don't have to be conscious of it all the time, it's functioning and letting the entire team take it forward in an unconscious way. It's like driving. You don't have to think. It's like your muscle memory and your the way your movements and the way your responses would function. They function, and that's how an organization should be. I must say I haven't visited BHEL more recently, but this is my lasting impression of BHEL.
Suhas is online now.
Yes, sir.
Suhas, you can unmute yourself and ask your question, please. And Sir Vishal is unable to unmute, so maybe I will ask the question on his behalf. Let me find out. Yeah,
Hi, Suhas here.
Yes, Suhas, go ahead.
So, Mathur sir, nice to see you. I had attended the working conference in Jaipur in 2018.
Yes, of course, I remember you, Suhas. Welcome.
Yeah.
Great to see you again.
Nice. Yeah, nice to see you again, and nice to hear you after a long time. And it was a very good session. I'm interested in knowing more about the dualities of Bhagavad Gita that you talked about. So, I know the time now wouldn't be sufficient to discuss about it, but if you could send me that paper,
I'll send you the paper.
And I'll ask you the questions on that on an email so that
we'll continue this dialogue even on email. Send me an email to let me have your latest email to which I can write.
Sure, sir. Sure, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sir Vishal has some question related to the data. He says, from your comments at the start of this session, you mentioned that Indian economy is on decline since last 4 years. But after GST got introduced 3 years back, the very next year GDP grew to 7 to 8%. So do you have any data to back the argument?
Yes, the official GDP statistics indicate that the growth rate of Indian GDP has been declining in the last 4 years, and the decline has been gradual. It's not sudden decline. So it's been declining by about 0.5%, 1%, and this is the official figures, not my figures. So we do find that decline happening. It's happening even before the COVID pandemic struck. The second issue is that there are some problems with Indian economic statistics. And this is why intertemporal comparisons have become a bit difficult. As an economist, let me point out to you 3 infirmities in Indian economic intertemporal comparisons. One is that the 50th NSS survey and before had a different way of recording the economic activity, and after the 50th National Sample Survey, there's a different way. So because of that, we are actually not able to count some people who should have been counted in the economic statistics. Second problem that we've encountered is that this is an old problem. It happened during the UPA regime. In 2006 or thereabouts, we changed the poverty line. So instead of changing the number of people who were considered poor, we changed the poverty line, and by doing that, data before that period and after that period for even the poor is not comparable. The third thing that I'd like to point out to you is that GDP growth, I personally have a lot to quarrel with, not because of the numbers, but because of what it represents. So consider that many things that are affected by taxes are also, for example, products like cigarettes, products like alcohol. Now, obviously, you would have a higher GDP if there was more drinking, and you would have a higher GDP if there was more smoking. You would probably have a higher GDP from also more hospital expenses for cancer patients and for people with liver ailments. So not everything that GDP contains and is increasing can be considered to be an increase in the right direction. So instead of looking only at GDP, we should be looking at human well-being, and there are other measures of human development than GDP. One of the fundamental problems with GDP that we have also in India is that the people who drive GDP growth are essentially the very rich, whose consumption pattern requires production of luxury goods. And these luxury goods, they may have some backward effects in intermediate goods, but the middle class and the really poor, they are neither part of that GDP experience, nor are they part of the consumption experience, nor are they part of the production experience. So we get into a very peculiar situation. To give you this data at a state level, look at the states that are the richest in minerals in the country. And I'm now talking of Orissa, Jharkhand, and Chhattisgarh. Now, these states, more than 80% of the districts in these states are among the 150 poorest districts in the country. And these are the districts that produce very high GDP because of the mineral being extracted, and because the price of coal has gone up 3 times, the price of chromium has doubled, the price of iron has gone up 10 times in 10 years. So the GDP will give you a different figure and will give you a different sense, even in a spatial way, than would the actual conditions of the people on the ground. Sorry for this long response, but I thought I should make myself clearer.
Sir, I think we'll stop here now. And before I thank you, I would like to thank my communications team, which is now taken care by Mansi. And sir, she has worked hard enough to ensure that this particular talk, comes live. And after thanking Mansi sir, thanks to all the audience for being a lively participant, lively audience, asking very interesting questions and making this talk entertaining and learning for me also. Sir, without thanking you, there is no way, I can go. Because of you, this talk has been possible, and it has been very, very educative, very knowledgeable. I wish and I request that once again, sometime after some time, please do come on this platform and share more knowledge on duality, on Gita, on different subjects, on economics, and so on and so forth. Will be very much more learned, more knowledgeable, more enriched with your talks. Thanks.
I'd be delighted to do that, Sanjay. I only wanted to humbly suggest that those of you who have read the book, if you have any thoughts and questions, please feel free. And those of you who have not read this book with the green cover, Mysteries in Management, if you would care to, then please do have a look at the book. And if you have any thoughts from the book, I'll be very happy to continue this conversation. And Sanjay, I would be always available to you. You have a special claim on me anyway. So I'll be happy to come back in your webinar series anytime.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. Thanks to all of you. Dear participants, we'll have one more talk next week. Please do join them. Thank you. Mansi, don't switch the talk off. Let everyone go, then only we'll switch it off. Thank you. Thank you. दीक्षित, आपका फोटो से ऐसा लगता है जैसे आप लाइव बैठे हुए हैं. It's so lively photo.
Well, I'm still here.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Mathur. I just thought I will leave after everyone leaves.
Okay.
But
I want to thank you very much for organizing this, and very organized. And I'd also like to thank you for your support to me during this very difficult day today. After I burnt my hand.
I hope you are fine now. Kumud was very much worried, so she had called me.
In fact, I was thinking, I wanted to tell you this, that as we are able to now get into a more private mode of conversing, are there still people or are they gone?
Sir, there are a few people still.
People still here, okay.
So we can talk on phone, sir. That's okay.
All right. Okay. All right.
I will call you, sir, after that.
I wanted to share with you something about what Kumud was suggesting.
Ji. But sir, your mobile is not working. So when I tried to call you before this talk, it was switched off.
I put it on the charger and I forgot to take it off the charger.
Okay.
It's still on the charger.
Right. Okay, sir. Then we'll move out of this room and I will call you.
I'll open it because it's enough. It has been charged enough now.
Yes. Thank you. Mansi, we can close the meeting now.